keeping me safe and sound. And when I fall, you tied a rope to me. You're blessing me every day. I was down with an illusion, like a sparrow with broken wings. But now I shine with your reflection on me. I'm getting back up on my feet. That you showed up was written in my palm. You are a statement, explode like a bomb. I get to push myself to victory. You make me winner. You cut me loose and set me free. You make me win in every way. You showed me how to spread my wings. Yes, I'm the winner of the day.
Hey everybody, welcome to Outpost Gray, a YouTube channel designed to provide you education in cybersecurity, technology, and innovation. I'm your host, Jack Scott, and today I'm going to be standing, not really sitting down, with Thomas Ryan. But before we jump into it, a couple of quick admin notes for you guys. So wearing this cool shirt. This is from Sands. This is actually from Cyberfest, but they gave me some free gear because I'm going to be part of this really cool event that is actually going to be the New to Cyber panel. And I'll do a quick screen share so you guys can see what I'm talking about. This event, I don't think it's going to allow me to share that screen. So this is a fail. Can you guys see? Nope, it won't let me share it. So disregard that. All right, so New to Cyber Sands. What's going to be happening is on March 23rd, I'm going to be part of an amazing panel, and the panelists will include myself, Ben Smith, who will be hosting it, Christina Morillo, and Renee Small, some big legends in the industry. It's an all-woman panel. We're all authors or co-authors or editors of a book. So really, really excited about that. There'll be more information coming out about that. And I would absolutely encourage you, if you're wanting to break into the industry or just curious about getting more education and learning more about the other individuals on the panel, definitely join that. The next thing is for next week. I am so excited because we are starting our highlight series, and we are going to be highlighting one woman per month to be showing and displaying their exceptional things that they have done either in the technology or the innovation space. And this month is going to be Janine Medina, and she is actually a IoMT hacker, and she's the co-founder of Biohacking Village. So definitely stay tuned for that. And then lastly, if you haven't done so already and I haven't won you over, I encourage you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And as you're listening to this episode today, with the discussion between Tom and I, and you're just absolutely enthralled and in love, make sure to like and make sure to share it out with others. And one last thing before I hop into introducing the guest, because Tom's right there in the green screen. I'm watching him in the green room right now. Thank you to everybody that's live. I already saw you guys jump in early. You are the reason that this happens, and I am so thankful to each and every one of you. You are the very best. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get Tom in here. Oh, let me do a quick intro. I'm going to let him introduce himself, but if you guys don't know Tom Ryan, you definitely need to follow this guy. Amazing wealth of knowledge. Today, we're going to be talking about the current state of cybersecurity. If you've turned on the TV, there's a lot of things taking place, probably even more so than normal because of the unfortunate things that are happening in Eastern Europe. So we're not going to dive into politics, but we are going to talk about the current state of cybersecurity, what that impact looks like. Ryan has a wealth of knowledge, over 2 decades of experience in this space. He's a developer, he's a founder, he's a hacker, and a myriad of other titles. So you guys are in for a great treat, and I've been wanting to get him on the show for a while, so I'm excited for this. So let's go ahead and let's pull Tom on the stage. I always love that. Yes. What is going on, Tom? How are you? I'm excited about this.
I've been real busy, just like everybody else in this industry.
You've got like a fan club going on over here in the group chat. I think everybody's really excited. I think you're bringing the heat today. We already have like 12 to 15 people have already hopped in. So I'm really excited about this.
Man, I wish I could see that chat.
Yeah, you can't see the chat over here. I even have LinkedIn people. So it's pretty exciting times. For anybody that may not know about your background, can you take a couple of minutes and share a little bit about who Tom Ryan is and how you got into this space? And like, because you started in the late 90s. So how did that happen?
So I got into this space. I was working as a developer. Company I was working at, we got popped twice in the same year. First one was the first Harry Potter website that was being launched. It was a little 16-year-old kid that decided, hey, let me deface it. No, there wasn't e-commerce, nothing to steal back then. That's kind of how it started. Then I just zoomed my way up. Then we got hit again. It was a Chinese-American hacker war. It was back then NT4, the easiest thing on the planet to hack. And I was Perl developer at the time, as well as many other things. And you learn quickly how, what a Perl script can do, especially to those old NT4 systems. And then since then, it's just been a long journey from there, running pen test teams, running red teams, ran my own business for a while, which was a hell of a journey. And everybody remembers 2010, Robin Sage. That's where it really got interesting, showing the dangers of social media.
Yeah, let's talk about those dangers of social media and a little bit about Robin Sage. I mean, social media is not going away. If anything, it's going to just become more prevalent. I feel like we have more apps that are popping up every week to spread our footprint a little bit wider in the social media space. So what caused you to want to do Robin Sage and go down that path?
So it was a bunch of things. One, make people aware of all the information that they're sharing. Okay, believe it or not, some of the things I started looking at were MySpace, just to give you an example of how far back it went. And then from that, all the EXIF data that were in the images. So when you take a picture, what info is in that image? Okay, and then when you're sharing out so much of your life,
yeah,
you may not, you may have some OPSEC, but guess what? Your family doesn't. So all of a sudden they have the whole perimeter view of your house. They know your geolocation. Who's it at the same time? Right after I did as I did the presentation, the head of MI6 got popped. His information was shown because his wife took beach pictures and posted them, and it also showed his relationships to the people he was at the beach with. We were unfortunate enough to see him in Speedos.
Yeah. So what would be some advice that you could give to people that, like, for myself, I have a social media footprint, and we won't go down this path because we could have an entire session on this, but for the threatscape and how it's growing and the way that adversaries are using social engineering, and they're leveraging social media to get access to PII information. How can individuals like ourselves that are out there, that you host a room on Clubhouse, you're out there's other individuals in the chat right now that have a presence. How can we secure ourselves when we're public facing like this?
Right. It's becoming more and more difficult. Okay. The more technology grows, I always like to call it technology without limits. As it grows, our level of exposure grows. We've also gone into this with metaverse stuff and AR and VR and how that's going to change the whole threat landscape. First off, OPSEC. So number of controlled images that are out there of you, right, is always a helpful thing. I started doing that a long time ago, probably back around the time of Robin, when I ended up deleting my Facebook account. Now, the problem is you've experienced as well, as you're trying to build your brand and you're trying to build a business, you're forced back into that rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, is it worth it or is it not? So the only thing I tell people, well, you kind of have to do it. Just don't build your business around that particular platform.
Mm-hmm.
Because nowadays, when we see the cancel culture, it's probably worse if they deplatform you than your whole business is down the tubes.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure you structure yourself so that doesn't happen. Also, be situational awareness is the word I'm always using. Always be situationally aware of whatever you're doing. Black Hat's coming up soon. Everybody's going to be showing up because guess what? It's in person. A lot of stupid things happen at Black Hat. I've been going since 99, right? My first Black Hat. Met tons of great people there. But man, we were mischievous back then. Glad there was no social media, cell phone cameras, everything. But that's kind of how things change.
Yeah.
We can't control who has our data anymore. And that's been a big topic of, a host of different things. So nowadays, it's even the problem with criminals. Okay, you turn around, you look at, the ransomware guys, they're doing Bitcoin, you can't track them down. It's decentralized. No, it's not. So how do we track down those criminals and what can we do?
Yeah, that's a great point. And this is why I wanted to have you on the show, is to discuss like where have we come from and where are we going, especially with the social media piece. And I want to pivot a little bit. And there was actually, Jonathan just popped in a question, which is, I think, a really good pivot into talking about the thing that's going on right now, the big war that we're having in Eastern Europe, and not so much the guerrilla warfare, but the cyber warfare that's taking place. And he had a question, pop this up here. Given the conflict we're currently facing Ukraine, how relevant are actors like the Jester and other pro-Western vigilant actors today?
Right. So great question.
Yeah.
So what they're doing is always, it's questionable. And the reason why I say it's questionable, from working on the intelligence side of the house, their approach is to DDoS everything. So is that the best approach? Because then you take down, there's two different ways they do it. They'll either DDoS you, or they have a whole bot of accounts and deplatform you. So both ways kind of hinder intelligence collection. The normal person sees this as a great thing, but then the intelligence guys are like, we would rather have the intelligence than you take them off the platform. So it's a catch-22.
I have a question, and this was actually posed to me by one of my fellow classmates, and I know how I answered it, but I'd be curious for your input. He asked, he's not really familiar with, threat actors coming in and encrypting and destroying data and the purpose behind it. So he said, he said, I'm seeing a lot on the news that malware is being utilized against Ukraine to encrypt and destroy the data. But if Russia wanted to do that, why would they do that? Because isn't that impeding their overall mission of pulling out the data and using the data against them? And so what would your thoughts be? Why would Russia want to do that, encrypt and destroy the data?
So a couple of reasons. One would most likely be, they have no way of moving any type of money from a ransom. That would be one way. The next way would be, all right, these guys really pissed us off, or we want them to feel the pain.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because the big questionable thing is based on, everybody looks at risk based on what am I insured for or not.
Mm-hmm.
Is it cheaper to be covered under insurance or actually fix the problem? And then that's also how they make their decisions on how they buy software. Is it good enough to check the compliance box and make the regulators happy? Or, am I truly doing the right thing?
Mm-hmm.
Wiping out all the data causes lots of pain. And we saw this happen with NotPetya,
Mm-hmm.
what happened with Maersk, what happened with Merck, what happened with everybody. It caused a lot of pain. Okay, Merck, I think Merck was out of commission for about 6 months.
Yeah.
And that's a huge impact on the business. It's also a huge impact on life itself, because now you have 6 months of the medicines or everything else that they made that are not available.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's to me in my world, that would probably be almost an act of war, depending on what it was.
Yeah, and they were debating on calling it an act of war, the Merck specifically. And then they finally got their insurance claim just a few weeks ago. I just did a paper on NotPetya, and that was portion of it. So Ukraine, Russia, what is real and what is not real of what we're seeing? Are you able to differentiate that? Because we all know that Russia is the king of disinformation campaigns and putting out there's mixed information going on of what's going on actually over there. And we're talking about not just from the guerrilla side, but from the cyber side. Is there nation state actors, or right now, is it just, isolated groups, threat groups that are attacking Ukraine and in turn, Western side America, because we've got other groups like Anonymous that are then attacking and supporting the Ukraine efforts?
Right. When you look at that, there was multiple stages of misinformation. Okay. I like to look at it as misinformation for good, misinformation for bad. So some of the misinformation for good that gave a lot of hope, one, always seeing their president out there in the fight. That wasn't real misinformation. That was real. But I was shocked to see he had no protection team around him. So I always questioned, all right, so what's really going on in this picture? Then you had the ghost of Kiev, the mysterious MiG.
Mm-hmm.
That provided a ton of hope. Right? Providing hope in a situation like that's a positive thing, right? Because it motivates people. It says, okay, we can do this. We can pull through this. Problem is, when you start looking at it and then you realize these pictures and these videos are from a video game. All right. And it took a gamer to find that. And that's why I always say, when you build out the teams, make sure you have the right people in play. Then you had, the Miss Ukraine. Okay, it showed her out in the fight. I thought, that's awesome. But then the average person's like, oh, that's amazing. Look at this. It's like, but that's an airsoft gun.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They're like, well, how do you know? I said, first of all, she's in prone position without a mag. Problem number one. Problem number two, you see the blue thing around her arm? That indicates it's either airsoft or paintball. Number three, come on, there was a sticker on the M4. I don't know a single Ukrainian that uses an M4. They're all using AK-47s. But there was a sticker on it indicating that, that's either airsoft or paintball because any real weapon's going to be snapped. But it provided hope. Then you go to the opposite side with the Russian misinformation. They were sitting there coming up with every story in the book, and it also created lots of interesting conversations, okay, to see where they were going with cryptocurrency. All right. That was interesting because it looked like Russia attacked Kazakhstan. There was a good conversation on this one last night that I didn't even think about. It was probably a lot of them pulling out their Bitcoin and moving it because it falls in the same timeline as when the plans were made. And the reason why we found what those Russian plans were, sadly enough, it's, you talk to a lot of people, like we saw it on TikTok. All right. And what they were doing was they were showing the people, and they were showing screenshots of all the Russian documents that they caught in some of those trucks, that this was planned on January 16th. This was the execution date. And I always tell people the key thing to do is do that timeline analysis. Timeline analysis will help bring the story. The problem with social media today is when you go to, say, Instagram Reels, TikTok, it shortens a person's mindset. They're used to seeing something done in 20 seconds to a minute. All right. So they don't take the time to go and do the research anymore. That's where I see one of the bigger problems, because I've seen this trickle over into work. Okay. I had a customer that asked me, can you do training videos in like 2 minute segments? I'm like, training videos in 2 minute segments. Interesting. On application security. All right. I guess I could do 2 minutes each, but it'd be a long playlist.
Yeah, that would be extremely long. Oh my God. That's somebody that doesn't understand what goes in, understand InfoSec and the amount of information that to receive. I don't know what you would teach in 2 minutes. High level, super, super high level.
Install license file.
Yeah. That's it. And then you would have another clip and another clip. 2 minutes. Chip's over here laughing on that. Yeah. Dear you. So, I want to pivot. This is not for cybersecurity, but I want to get your thoughts on it because it's definitely been thrown around a lot. Nuclear war. Do you think that Russia would step into that space and could possibly leverage nuclear weapons against Ukraine? Now, I don't want to deep dive into this. I just want to get your thoughts.
I think nuclear threat is a bigger thing, because then I'd have to wonder where China's stance on that would be. Because what would the blowback on China be for that as well? When you turn around and you look at the two moves that they've made in a week on the two different power facilities, it's sketchy, and they keep going back to Chernobyl, because Chernobyl brings the fear of God to everybody because of what happened in '86. All right. And what happens then?
Yeah.
And then when you start asking people on the ground, now you have Ukraine's number one ally over there, Poland, nervous as hell.
Yeah.
Okay. They're right there. They're right there. So the wind blows in the wrong direction, it's all over them.
Yep.
Then it also, from a mindset perspective, if he does that, it's going to go into Belarus first. And then after Belarus, it's going to take out Russia. So what do they think of that? What are my thoughts on it? And then last night, an interesting conversation came up going back to social media. Well, how can we get people to actually see this in Russia, the actual real news? So there's two that were interesting. There was a conversation on, teaching the Russians to use Tor and VPNs so they can actually see what's going on in the rest of the world. The other one that was interesting, this will make you laugh, put all the information in Tinder profiles and then set your location in Moscow. So it'll all be part of your Tinder profile.
Interesting. That's funny. Wow.
So people come up with some creative ideas. It's been interesting to see where it went. And it kind of spilled over from when the Russians first, invaded. What they were looking at is they were actually using Tinder profiles. And I'm sitting there like, that's hilarious considering everything from the Robin Sage stuff. So I posted something on LinkedIn. And the bad part about posting something on LinkedIn, about 20 people literally started telling the same story I posted on LinkedIn as real news.
Oh my God.
And I said, this is a hypothetical.
You just made misinformation happen. You were the disinformation that then just created misinformation. Good job.
Yes.
Bravo. Oh my gosh. People don't fact check enough. You sent me a video actually of a drone, and as soon as you sent it to me, I started looking at it and I was like, I'd have to fact check that to verify how accurate that video content was. Because at one time you could see that they were videoing it on a computer screen because of the explosion and the camera moved. And I'm like, but they make it look like it was actually in the cockpit of the drone or the device, except for a couple of times they weren't perfect with their video editing. And I was like, so it made me question. And then they were doing a lot of repeats of the same image over and over again. So yeah, goes back to the video game example. So let's do a pivot. Let's talk about ransomware and the future of ransomware. This isn't going away. However, it's maturing. Adversaries are finding more unique and clever ways, we'll just call it that, of targeting their industries, their individuals, their victims. What are your thoughts around ransomware? It's not going away, but what's going to happen in the near or the future term?
Yeah. So the interesting part about putting hacker groups together, a lot of times people keep a strong OPSEC and they get together because they feel they can achieve, different goals together. If you remember what happened with Conti, right? Their situational awareness was like, hey, we're going to attack Ukraine. Well, somebody on your team's from Ukraine. So all of a sudden, all these years of logs are dumped. Also, all your code to your ransomware is dumped. Okay. Now, when you start to look at that, all those conversations, guess what? You start finding out physical assets that are involved, meaning human assets, or a couple of human assets around the country that were picked up in those chats. And that's where it gets interesting. So at what point do people start infiltrating these groups? And it's a difficult thing, but I don't think it's going away anytime soon because I see it as a fast way of making money. And it's not just the Russians. Everybody thinks it's just the Russians. No, there's Chinese ransomware groups. There's North Korean ransomware groups. You pick the flavor. It's not going away because it's fast cash, and it's usually coming out of countries that are sanctioned.
Yeah, let's talk about the Conti ransomware group and it being infiltrated by, I don't know, was it one individual? Was it a group of individuals that were able to get in there and then take over they took over the Twitter account, didn't they? Of one of the things, and then he
created a separate one.
Okay, they
created a separate one called ConsonLeaks.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's where he started posting everything. And then they started posting, it first started up and we're like, what? And then we're starting to go deeper down the rabbit hole, and then you start digging into it. I think the hardest part of that whole thing was actually finding a Russian translator to go through all those years of logs. But there was tons. And I guarantee you people are going to start targeting it because you saw what happened with the other ransomware. Well, it was a hacker group when they hit NVIDIA. When they hit NVIDIA, all of a sudden they got upset because they got hacked back.
Yeah, talk about that. Hackback, yes.
So the hackback stuff has always been a question on the table because all of us that have worked in intelligence know attribution is hard. Okay. IOCs and TTPs, easy to replicate, easy to make it look like it's somebody else. So much so, we even saw a group in India that was doing that to people. With that being said, do you want to allow everybody to do that? What happens if they're attacking you from a pivot point? All right. We all know they've been hitting universities. Universities have been pivot points since the 80s and 90s, back when it was just dial up. But that's how it's always been. So there's always been those pivot points, always there's been those dump spots. So how are you going to prevent somebody from hacking the wrong target? There have been several cases out there where there have been successful ones, where it's actually been, like, well, prove it happened. And then all of a sudden you see the video pop up of, okay, here, we turn their camera on as we compromise their machines. Now, the thing is, the only way to do a true hack back is you have to catch them in the process. Okay? Because as you're catching them in the process, it's a lot easier. If it's an after the fact, it's more difficult. The only thing I think that's viable to an actual hackback is if you're going in to wipe out the data they stole from you. But who's to say you're authorized to do that? Because that itself could be an international incident. And that's where that tricky fine line thing gets put in play that's been in discussion for at least 10 years.
Yeah, it's a very touchy area. So pretty sure this is Jennifer. Yeah. So Miss Dark Council. I was like, yeah, that's awesome. Will ransomware groups start turning on each other?
That would be like the old days. So that's an interesting question, because back in the old days, what happened was you would have different hacker groups that would turn on each other. So one would go in, hack in, and then they would patch everything from their competitor. Okay. And when I say old days, I'm talking like 2002, 2004. And I always thought that was interesting the way they would do that. Do I think they will? Possibly. It all depends on who's trying to make the money. Now, where it'll get interesting, if it's a Chinese hacker group versus a Russian hacker group, or a North Korean hacker group or Iranian hacker group. So we haven't seen that yet, but it will be interesting when we do.
Yeah. Going back to the Russian-Ukraine, because right now we're seeing Conti, we're seeing Anonymous, but we haven't seen any nation state actors coming forward to fight this war. Therefore, it's not an active war, or nothing can really be done because it's individually led because of the different laws that we have in place because of the cybersecurity laws. With that being said, do you think that there could be a point? I mean, this is a twofold. Let me rephrase that. Knowing the adversary, let's call him Putin, knowing Putin and the way that he operates, and he knows how to work within the parameters, such as what he's doing right now. So Article 5 of NATO isn't enacted, and the other individuals inside of the NATO can't come to Ukraine's rescue. So he's very good and strategic at that. Do you think that he's also strategic with the way that he's doing cyber activity, where he knows he's not going to deploy the GRU or APT-28 or anything like that? Instead, he's going to use individuals, but he's not doing it because it's not nation states. However, there could be nation state hand in the cyber play.
Yeah, well, the beauty of all these little hacker groups that are out there, welcome to the world of cyber mercenaries. All right. Now I could say I was Eric Prince and I wanted to start a group of cyber mercenaries now instead. All it takes is to go grab one of these. I'm now anonymous. Okay. We can go in as anonymous and do what we need to do because we're anonymous. Mm-hmm. Now, could that be done? I don't see a reason why not. We're anonymous, and then the ones that always get blamed for this because they don't realize it, like the ones that get pulled into the IT army, the Ukrainian IT army. Oh, we're going to go in the fight. I'm like, what fighting have you ever done between physical and cyber? First of all, know the law, the legal implications that you would get yourself into. Number one. Number two, do you want a bunch of Russian mobsters knocking on your door from, say, Brighton Beach or Brooklyn, because you just, you just hit off the wrong business? I mean, everybody thinks, oh, this is cyber because we fight on Twitter. No, this gets pretty kinetic, and I can guarantee you they will bump you off the road, and then you will see something that's not so cyber.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the reality of it. I mean, and everyone's like, give me one example. I said, okay, way back in the day, there was this lovely little hacker group. Okay. Team Poison. All right. And there was this one guy, Trick. So Trick was calling GCHQ, pretending, he's making terrorist threats to them. Well, guess what happened? Do you think they tracked him down and knocked on his door? Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden he runs away. He becomes the cyber caliphate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what happened? He posted a picture, EXIF data in the picture. Oh, wow, thanks. Now you gave us the geolocation to drone you. And that's essentially what happened. So if you think this doesn't get kinetic, you're wrong. So know what you're getting into and don't be the pawn in the game, because the real actors are not going to get caught. You'll be the pawn. You will be the one blamed.
Yeah, look what Chip said. Can you believe it? Tom is right. Bam, dropping the knowledge bombs. And then pull this up really quick. He made a comment, and that's true. I keep saying nation state, but it did get changed to state nation. That was just like in the last year or something. But it's hacker groups versus state nations. We did have a quick question in here. Let me go. Where was it? Okay, maybe. Oh, okay. It was previously on what you were talking about. This is a LinkedIn user. Do you think that kicking out competitors is more likely from the APTs than the ransomware? Do you remember what we were discussing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do I think it probably is more likely from the APT than a ransomware, guys, to be honest. But what's to say? You see, because you have to remember, these places are set up like a business. Okay. What's to say they're not working in both? Okay. How many of us have side jobs outside of our 9-to-5s? Plenty of us do, because to most people, you can never make enough money. If you're in the cyberspace, there's a massive shortage. Okay. So everybody's always asking you questions. And it could be the silliest ones, and it's like, well, what do I do with my business? Am I really a target? It's like, who do you do business with? And then you can define if you're really a target, or if you're a target from a spray and pray. All right. Well, what do you mean? And then you just pull up their internet router logs and say, here, your internet logs show you're scanned at least 100 times a day to see if there's anything opened. Or your secretary clicks on a link and compromises all your information. And that's what happened. And then since COVID, we saw this happen. We saw this happen, with SolarWinds, perfect example. They hacked their build pipeline. And the reason why I bring up a build pipeline is if you hack that build pipeline, as that code is built, it's automatically signed. So it's always legitimate. All right. So don't think, this is something new, because since then I started paying attention to a lot of it, and I've tracked out about 28 different instances of where this happened. And it all started from the source repo, whether they hit a GitLab or GitHub or whatever. I'm not saying that GitLab or GitHub are compromised, but it's either that's compromised or IAM is compromised. So how you set up your identity and access management. Are you using the same usernames and passwords everywhere? Or did your work set something up? Because from the red teamer perspective, we always use GitHub. Right? Reason why is we know it's open at every company, so we know we can leave our toolkits in there. Once we're in, we pull everything from there. And that's just common mindset.
Speaking of like breaking into things and hacking things and discussing it, you rang a bell on something I listened to this morning during one of my podcasts. Maybe you've heard about it, but UPS systems are now having vulnerabilities where back in the day, even recently, we didn't think that you could hack a UPS system, a backup system. And I guess I'm reading this right now. Millions of APC smart UPS devices might be hacked and damaged remotely. So that's another thing. Eventually, I feel like everything. Oh, and another thing is, have you heard about the new smart cars that they're creating that are going to be powering the grid? So they're going to do two-way. They'll have a way of powering your house. So say you run out of electricity, it can do two-way powering. So not just receiving and powering the vehicle, but you can power your house. My first thought was, well, how is that going to be hackable now? And now you're plugging that into your house, which we're already doing, but now you're going to have that two-way frequency being able to go in. They could hack the vehicle and then surge your house. I mean, there's just so many different.
Yeah, there's so many. So
many
I think the best was, remember when Charlie Miller and Chris Balasek, started the whole car hacking craze? What people weren't paying attention to is every car that they showed in that list was used in law enforcement and executive protection. All right, so when you pay attention to it, it's like, okay. And then it just drastically grew. Then they started doing Teslas, and some of the Tesla ones were so simple that, I think my daughter could do it. It was basically putting black tape over the speed sign, changing it from 35 to 85, and watch the car take off. It's all where your mindset is, and that's why I always look at a team. It's like, I don't want a team of a bunch of me. I want a team of different me's, people that think different, and that brings so much more perspective. That's why you always see me and Jennifer go at it, because a hacker mindset and a lawyer mindset are always totally different, and it adds a lot of fun to the game. So, and it also helps protect you. It's like, okay, what can I do without getting arrested? Mm-hmm. Because everyone knows me knows I've walked that. I never say I'm a white hat. I never say I'm a black hat. It's always a 50 shades of gray hat, depending on the wind that day. All right. Because, you know as well as I do, you get in this research, it's like boom, 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 boom. And some of the vulnerabilities and exploits you find, I think the longest one I found was when I reported it, it took them 3 years to fix. Mm-hmm. And that's because I had a gag order. I couldn't talk about it.
That's crazy. When I hear about vulnerabilities that were out, and then when I wrote a paper on the NotPetya specifically focused on Ukraine and their MedDocs accounting system, the big breach that happened that flowed over into Merck's. And they knew about the vulnerability. They knew about it like a year prior, but had they patched it, they would have never been, the probability of them getting breached would have been significantly reduced. And so things like that just like get me so frustrated. But this is never ending, Tom. Like, this is the patching. We know that patching is one of the primary areas for vulnerabilities. And because of the lack of patching or poor patch management, these organizations are susceptible to a cyber attack. So what does the future look like in this area? Because the attackers know that that's where one of their Achilles heel, outside of like weak passwords and users and phishing emails and users clicking on emails. What can we do? Like, we obviously know that this is an area of concern, but we as an industry are still not doing enough about it.
No, we're never doing enough about it, because, and this is what I learned about. So the biggest lesson for a lot of them, believe it or not, was back in December with Log4j. In the AppSec world, what happened was developers would always mark it as a false positive. They say it's a functional piece of software inside the application. Okay. They would say there's no CVEs on it, there's no CWEs, it's a false positive. Well, when Log4j came out, guess what? The first thing that had to happen? They had to go through all their vulnerabilities in their AppSec program and look at everyone that was marked a false positive. Okay, I can tell you several large corporations had millions of them. All right, so those developers did not have a pretty holidays. All right, because they had all that backlog of fixing it. But then a lot of this comes back from the old days of Microsoft. All right, remember, nobody trusted Microsoft or their patches or their updates. So they always had this wait window as to when they would do that. So because of that, they didn't trust any software. And it always pushed them to not update to the latest and greatest. Because of that, then we were always held to these. I mean, it was, some companies were 60, 90-day windows. Other ones are 1 to 2 years. I had customers that were 4 or 5 years behind. And I'm like, this is not acceptable. What happened is believe it or not, the ransomware had changed the game, because now you had the regulators. But let me rephrase that. It changed the game for publicly traded companies, because the regulators would come in and ding them on it. And then the insurance companies started coming in and dinging them on it, saying, okay, well, you don't have this based on these, tests that were done. So your insurance costs are going to go up. And then everybody starts to see that changes our risk model because we can't refer back to cost of insurance. So they've slowly started to upgrade. And I could say some of the bigger, larger organizations I deal with on a daily basis, they're upgrading within, a couple of weeks, and they still have that couple of week window because they have to make sure it's not going to break anything else.
Yep. I just pulled this up really quick. So this is correct to the LinkedIn user. Yeah, it was the supply chain. It was like MedDocs was the name of it, and it was distributed through one of their patch systems that they knew about. But it was also one of the tools. One of the tools that they used was the same one that was used just a month prior in the WannaCry attack, and they actually, we won't go into that, but
WannaCry was WeChat.
Yeah, WeChat, but it was a tooling that was utilized. It was a Windows tooling that they utilized within WannaCry that was similar to NotPetya that they had leveraged. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but we won't dive too much into that. I want to talk to you. I want to talk more on the Russia stuff. So the Russian-Ukraine stuff, and we were chatting about this offline about all of the sanctions. There's a ton of sanctions. Don't know how many, but there are a lot that are being enacted. I don't know if that's the right word, but they are being enacted on Russia right now because of what Russia is doing to Ukraine. With that being said, what are the impacts that we're going to be seeing in the near term and in the future with developers and getting work out of Russia? Do you see that that's going to be an impact for us because of these sanctions?
Yeah, so I look at it this way. So when we look at globalization, what happens is we use developers from around the world. Okay, we use them in India, we use them in Ireland, we use them in the Eastern Bloc. All right, the Eastern Bloc has proven these are really good engineers, so we're going to push it there. Yeah. All right, so what those sanctions started to cause is and make people realize, it's like, wow, we have 350,000 developers and QA people in the Ukraine. Where are they going? How do we keep them employed? What's the impact on our business? Oh, and also we have 150,000 that are in Russia. Okay. And what I've seen for the smaller businesses are really hurting because now they have no development team. You and I spoke off a line of that major financial, that had that team. And, what's the impact on it? Because now from a risk perspective, now you have to look at, did the team from Russia start entering any backdoors before this happened? Mm-hmm. Because even the best application security program is not going to detect backdoors in code. All right? Because that takes a lot of manual review and that takes a long time. The next thing that we have is, the same thing with the Ukraine. When the Russians started hacking into all the Ukraine places, did they impact any of the stuff in Ukraine? So it's kind of changed that threat landscape. Now that you have 500,000, developers and QA people out of the picture, guess what else is impacted? Well, because of that, you can come out with late releases. Oh, you have 0 days, but the team that focused on that was over in the Ukraine. It may take longer to fix that because they're the one that had the knowledge of that, how to fix that. And I think it's going to start to change people on what can we outsource and what can't we? Because before this was happening, what a lot of people were doing is, it's kind of weird because they were looking at India and India saying, oh, it's too expensive. I'm like, $29,000 a person is not too expensive for a year. So they started looking, and now this one's going to make you laugh because it changes the threat landscape. So from India, they started looking at Africa. Okay. Mm-hmm. Specific places like Nigeria to save $4,000 a person per year. All right. How much does an executive protection team cost to go to Africa? Because now you have to have that with you when you take a trip there. Mm-hmm. So you change it from going to a cyber to physical just to protect the people that you're sending there. Never mind the risk of them compromising somebody there and putting stuff in your code. And this is where the politics of business is always mind-blowing, but I'm not into politics. It makes you lose more hair,
Mm.
and I'm already losing it.
Yeah, we definitely won't go down the politic route, but going to what Chip said to you earlier about this being a proxy war, I'm curious how that's going to affect the overall threatscape. You know, we've got these individuals that are leaving Russia, and Chip even mentioned they're running to Ukraine and Australia. Is it Australia, Austria? But
they're going everywhere. Lots of going.
Yeah, I was just going to say it doesn't matter. They're going everywhere. But
Yep.
now we've because we can't, you know, being an intel, you can't say everybody that's leaving Russia is of good intent and not of malice intent. So now we've got individuals spread out. So now the threatscape is growing even more so. Do you foresee, because of this war and what's taking place right now between Russia and Ukraine, that the impacts that we're going to see are going to be enduring in a way? Like, this isn't over. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And it's not going to be so much maybe guerrilla, but it's going to turn into that proxy war and a global scale.
Yeah, there's going to be a hell of a lot more proxy wars. I think the one that scares me the most, that keeps popping up, you know, hot, cold. You know, they keep talking about the resurgence of an Arab Spring. Okay, and one of the countries in that resurgence would most likely be Egypt. So if there's a problem with Egypt and a problem with Israel, that's a problem with getting oil, right? Because of the Suez Canal. It's also a problem for military ships, all those ships that have to go through there.
Yeah.
And everybody goes, well, how big is the Suez Canal? I said, think of the Hudson River in New York and think of half the size of that in a width perspective. And then you have big ships moving from there. You can literally throw baseballs at a ship, you know, from standing in the sand. You know, so think of what else can be done from a threat landscape, right? And now imagine that's an oil ship. I mean, we saw the disruption, what happened when that one oil ship went off course and went sideways. Mm-hmm. It disrupted it for about a week? So think of what actually sinking a ship in the canal would do, right? It would be devastating. And then it's like, well, what do we do in that case? Now, what does that mean from the overall land perspective? These little proxy wars and sanctions have gotten interesting, because where it's gotten interesting is as soon as we did the oil sanction on Russia and our allies in NATO didn't follow us, Russia did a sanction on palladium. Palladium is also used in batteries. It's also used in everything to do with solar and rechargeables, right? That's a huge hit. We already just took the huge hit from what happened in Afghanistan, mm-hmm. and losing all that lithium to China. Okay, so they can financially, you know, it can turn into a financial war, right? And then financial war creates corruption. Mm-hmm. Corruption creates, you know, a whole new world of these hackers, because now it's like, how do I make money?
Yeah. I like that Chip dropped in there, Taiwan, the Taiwan piece. If anybody's watching this and you're not paying attention to Taiwan or don't know what we're talking about when we bring that up, I would say do some research. Oh, look who showed up. Mike Jones in the crowd. Good to see you out there, Mike. Gotta love Mike Jones. Check him out.
If it wasn't for Mike, you and I wouldn't have met.
True. Haunted hacker in the house.
Yeah, Halloween haunted hacker.
Yeah. And I wouldn't have met Jennifer. Chip, I met Chip. So yeah, that was a great event. His birthday event that was a 24-hour live stream or live Zoom that he lasted, I don't know, 16 hours. I don't remember. He couldn't make it the whole 24. We still love you, Mike. Okay.
You don't drink on the 24-hour event. That's why.
He did drink, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, I was like, and then he tried to like overcompensate with having energy drinks on top of the alcohol. I think he crashed at like 3 or 4 that morning the next day. Oh my gosh, talking smack about Mike. He can hear us though. Okay, so before we do a wrap and I pull you off the screen to do the wrap up, last and final thoughts for the viewers that you want, the final note that you'd love to leave them with.
So final thoughts, you know, I always say, so here's the interesting part. All the people that want to get into, you know, cyber, just don't hesitate on reaching out. You know, all of us are always willing to share knowledge. Knowledge is power, but it also helps build relationships. You know, everybody has a different mindset, different way of learning. So just don't hesitate on reaching out. Best way to get me is most likely LinkedIn.
Yeah, and just so you guys know, let me pull up his LinkedIn information here. Boom, go and find him. Also, every Wednesday at 6 to 7 p.m., he has the Security Mindset Club. So definitely stop in there. He's the host of that, founder of that. It's always a great time. Did I say that right? Say the right time?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay. Perfect. It's always a great time. Nice, safe space. You can share your thoughts and opinions. You can also just meet a whole bunch of amazing people. That's actually where I met Jennifer Sanders, who was on our show like a couple of weeks ago. So it's great stuff. You've been awesome. I'm going to have to definitely have you come back on, Tom, again. Well, we'll make that happen. You've been great. So thank you so much.
Black Hat Party.
Oh my God. I know. I need to get to Black Hat. I'll probably make that happen. It's in August, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. We'll figure it out. All right. I'm kicking you off, Tom.
All right. Thank you. Have a great one.
You too. All right, guys, there you go. Tom Ryan. Go make sure to follow him. Also, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure to share this out. I think there was a lot of great information out there. I loved the participation of everybody in the chat. A lot of good information coming out. Definitely go check out what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, because this is going to impact us long term. We're going to start seeing more of these impacts. Just to do a recap for next week, I'm going to see one more time if I can get this to share. Nope, can't. Try capturing a different screen. Okay, hold on. Let me move my messy screen so you guys don't see all my chat windows that I have up over here. Okay, let me see. I've got like 3 windows. So one of these. Okay, let's see if screen 1 will work. No. Okay, well, whatever. Doesn't want me to share it. Okay, next week, Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m., our regular time, that's Eastern Standard Time, we're going to be doing our highlight series, and it's called The Female Voice of Innovation and Technology. I'm so excited about this. We've been planning it for a couple of months, and the first person that we're going to be highlighting is Janine Medine, who is the co-founder of the Biohacking Village. She is a hacker herself. She got a reputation by hacking IoT devices. So an amazing guest. And then the following month after that, in April, we will have Alyssa Knight. So if you don't know her, you definitely want to connect with her. So that's kicking off next week on Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. And then another highlight, I'm going to be part of SANS, the New to Cyber panel. And it's going to be myself with Christina Murillo and Renee Smalls, and our host is Ben Smith. I'm really excited about it. That's why I'm wearing my SANS shirt. The panelists are all authors, co-authors, or editors of books. So I'm really, really excited. Plug into that. Go check it out. New to Cyber Summit 2022. Thank you all for coming to the live stream. You guys are the reason that make this possible, and I love it. We've had a lot of people in here today, so you're the best. Oh, and if I haven't reminded you or won you over yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. All right, I'm out of here. Thanks, guys.